How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. What do you think Rick Majerus would say about that situation?
Get it fixed. And then let's go out for dinner.
Dude, I have so many old school stuff. I was always, by the way, we're talking with Paul Biancardi, director of scouting for ESPN, also college basketball analyst, former D1 coach. I was always so fascinated by Majerus. I never got a chance to meet him. I was around him a little bit when I did some stuff with USA Basketball, but one of the most colorful figures in the history of basketball. What is one thing or a story about him that you carry? I know there's a ton, but anything that sticks out when you remember Coach Majerus?
Yeah, I got so many stories, Pete, and you only have so many minutes on this segment. But I want to tell you something that most people don't know. When my dad died, Coach somehow, some way reached out to me. And if you've ever been through the loss of a loved one or a parent, everyone goes into a shell in a different way. And even my closest friends and family, I didn't want to anyone. And somehow he got through to me. And I picked up the phone, didn't know it was him at the time. And he left some really profound words. He said, look, you can never take away the love that he had for you and you had for him. Of course, he lost his dad before that. So for him to track me down, for him to offer those words, that's the side of Rick Majerus that just most people don't see, that he went out of his way to track me down.
Yeah.
I'll always remember that, and I'll always remember his words. And I've passed those words on to other people who have lost their parents. And it's been very helpful.
That's amazing. And that's kind of, you're going to get either humor or impact when you talk about Coach Majerus to guys like you who had a front row seat. Let's talk about the impact in college basketball and some of these sensational freshmen. It's a brand new day, and we could talk about that ad nauseum, but I want to get perspective from you on this year's freshmen and how they have impacted college basketball. Have these guys come through and delivered?
In a big-time fashion. This is the class that I've been waiting for. Cooper Flagg reclassified. He's supposed to still be in high school. So try to process that. Can you imagine him in high school still?
No.
His ability to turn over a team is amazing in terms of, changing the way it was or impacting it to new levels. But the class as a whole was the class that I was waiting for, because when you look at the top five guys, they've all impacted college basketball. Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, Trey Johnson, VJ Edgecombe. Those guys have been sensational. They've some nights they've carried their team or they've been a big part of it. But the class as a whole, I think, has really elevated college basketball. It's a transfer game now. It's an older game. But you can't deny the fact that the freshmen can help you win games and possibly championships because of their readiness, because of their talent. And you have to get the right talent, Pete. It's so important. There are a lot of five-star guys on the board. Some of them have red flags. A lot of four-star talents on the board. They have red flags. We only rank 100 players out of 500,000 high school basketball players. We rank 100 seniors.
Wow.
So those kids are pretty talented, and they have some tremendous traits, meaning, characteristics that they bring, the intangibles. And I think that this freshman class has knocked it out of the park. And next year's freshman class, could be as good or better for college basketball. So college basketball right now is in a very rich place.
All right, before we get to next year's class, let's go backwards real quick. I want to get your take on VJ Edgecombe. What has he done that has surprised you this year? Because nobody knows these recruits like you. But on this big stage, playing in the Big 12, what have you seen from him that you've really taken note of and you thought, wow, I didn't even think it would be that good?
Well, first of all, VJ Edgecombe is a tremendous worker. He has those intangibles that people don't see, those everyday work habits. He always had a good jump shot. I think his ability to adjust to the physicality of the game, top athlete coming into college, like one of the best athletes in all of college basketball, certainly, in my opinion, was the best freshman athlete coming in along with Ace Bailey. But just his ability to make shots at a pretty good level in college, usually they dip when they go from senior year in high school to freshman year in college. I think he's hovering around 36%, and his free throw is over 75%. So for me, that shows me that he's worked on it all summer long. And the one thing that people don't realize about VJ Edgecombe, he's a really good passer. His assist numbers are pretty good for a guy who comes in not as a point guard, really as an off guard, but he can see the game. He can play out a pick and roll, athleticism off the charts, and he gives Baylor some excellent on-ball and off-ball defense.
We talk about next year's class. Who is an impact guy that people are not talking about right now that you expect to make a huge splash on the stage of college basketball next year?
Well, the three guys at the top that everyone's talking about, first of all, A.J. DeBonce is going to BYU. That's a game changer. They've never had a player like this in history. College basketball hasn't had a freshman like this in a long time. As great as Cooper Flagg is, A.J. DeBonce is as good, and he has as much upside, if not more, than Cooper Flagg. A.J. DeBonce reminds me of Tracy McGrady and LeBron James as an athlete in high school, Pete. And I saw both of those guys when I was coaching. So I know exactly what LeBron and T-Mac did as high school players. And DeBonce has that athleticism and has a big-time game. Darren Peterson is coming into Kansas. I think he's going to wow college basketball next year. I really do. He's phenomenal. And then Duke, again, gets the top recruit. They have Cameron Boozer, the son of Carlos Boozer. And when you think of Cameron Boozer, I think of a combination of Kevin Love and Tim Duncan.
Wow.
Great outlet. Yeah, great outlet passer. Great outlet passer. Like Kevin Love, Bill Walton, Wes Unseld type of outlet. When you see him throw an outlet, text me next year. Because he fires the ball off the rebound down the floor better than anyone I've seen since Kevin Love. And he has all the fundamentals at 6'9", like Tim Duncan. I call Cameron Boozer the little fundamental because he's only 6'9".
Well,
but
I mean,
those three guys.
That's super impressive, Paul, because you don't see, and I don't want to be like the get off my lawn basketball fan, but you don't see the guys who are so well furnished, for whatever reason, coming into college basketball at 18 years old. It's rare that you talk about guys this young, right? A lot of times you're talking about potential, not polish.
No question. And those three guys have both. They both have potential and they both have productivity, and they're ready-made. Like they could play right now or this year. They could have played in college basketball and they would produce, as well as Harper, Bailey, Trey Johnson, Cooper Flagg. These kids are NBA lottery picks. DeBonce is the favorite for number 1 in 2026, and Darren Peterson's right behind him, and Boozer's a top 10 pick. So college basketball next season is enormously healthy. And Arkansas has some talent coming in. They have Darius Acuff. He's the best scoring point guard in the class. And Arkansas, obviously, we watched them enough this year to know that they need a little bit of offense. And Darius Acuff Jr. will provide the offense. So college basketball, the NBA draft, in a very healthy space.
All right, Cooper Flagg, you've been on this guy since he was a sophomore in high school. What makes him so special? What does he do most,
Well, I'll give you a little background. His AAU coach, Andy Bedard, played for us at Boston College.
No, okay.
So going back, I get a phone call after his freshman year, and he says, "Hey, Coach, I got a kid who's really good from Maine." And I said, "Wait, stop. Maine? There's players in Maine?" And he says, "No, he's different, Coach. He's really different. He's going to leave Maine. He's going to go to a big high school, and you need to know about him." I said, "Okay, send me a film." So I saw the film. Obviously I thought he was very intriguing back then. He was 6'7", did a little bit of everything well, was all over the place. Fast forward, he goes to Montverde Academy. I watched him in the summertime play with Andy Bedard. And once I started watching him the first and second time, I knew he was special. Got him on the phone, talked to him, his parents, his grandparents. And the thing about Cooper Flagg that the nation needs to know, he's a purist. Pete, he's a purist. He plays for the true love of the game. He only plays to win, and he competes his you-know-what off all the time. Doesn't care about social media, doesn't care about branding, doesn't care about attention. He's an unselfish star who's a great teammate. I mean, if you could make a prospect for the college game and the NBA, it would be Cooper Flagg. He's a tremendous role model for today's player because he has an everyday approach. And as I mentioned, he only plays to win. It doesn't matter how many points he gets. Doesn't matter if he gets the post-game interview. This guy is everything that we would all want. And he's going to be the next star in the NBA. He'll be one of the faces in the NBA in the next 2 to 4 years.
So he's that good. Because it's one thing, to actually, like we talked about earlier, like the delivery of the goods in the NBA is something that's really special when they can transcend. And Cooper Flagg's a guy, you're playing your flag on him.
That's a nice way to say it. I talked to 2 NBA owners, not scouts, not GMs, 2 owners recently, and questions about the top of the draft. The thing about Cooper is a lot of people say he's got generational talent, and I would say he does close to have generational talent, but he has a generational approach. When you think of all the greatest that we've seen over our lifetime, going back to the Larry Birds, the Magic Johnsons, the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, the Isaiah Thomases, and Tim Duncans of the world, this kid has that type of approach. He has those intangibles. He has 5-star plus intangibles. His talent is super on both ends of the floor. Needs to be a better 3-point shooter, of course. Needs to improve his, lower body strength when you're going to play in the NBA. There's a lot of improvement left still for Cooper Flagg. As competitive, as coachable as we will ever see in our lifetime. So it's going to happen for that young man. And I'm excited when he gets to the NBA. Because he's going to have a dramatic effect on the league in the future.
You're having a dramatic effect on me. You're getting me pumped. How about I want to ask you a couple more things, but you touched on something I find pretty interesting. You said Cooper Flagg doesn't get on social media. How have you seen that whole new element to our world, right? Everybody, whether you're working at TD Bank or whether you're trying to play at TD Bank Garden, like how do you see that playing a role in the development of these young men? Does it slow them down sometimes? Does it maybe pick up the process because you get more eyes on them? What's been your takeaway?
Well, first of all, he's on social media, but he doesn't let it distract him. Okay, so he's on it, but he's not always on it, and it's not important to him. He'll take periods of time away from it. So I just want to make sure people understand he is on it, but he's very careful with it. I've seen social media become a major distraction for today's player. They care more about the likes, the hits, who they follow, and it's created what I call, Pete, the one game you can't win, the comparison game. And all of today's kids and the last few years and since social media has arrived, it's creating a anxiety effect of comparing themselves against everyone else. And that's unhealthy because anytime you compare yourself to anyone or anything, to me, it's a recipe for unhappiness for a lot of reasons that we know. There's no growth when you compare. So a lot of the kids at 16, 17, now 15, and even 14 are on social media. And I think it takes away from their actual time alone in the gym, in the weight room, watching film. It's used as a entertainment factor, which we all enjoy. But I don't think young kids understand how to control it and how to keep it in moderation. And I see it affecting them more than helping them. There's a lot of hype and a lot of fluff. And so I have to kind of cipher between what's real and what's not real. And social media makes it difficult.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question. You've got the keen eye of a former D1 big-time basketball coach, several big-time schools. You mentioned BC. We talked about St. Louis, Boston University. What about you and your experience there lends itself to like navigating these waters, not only figuring out what's real and what's fluff, but actually dissecting these guys and figuring out who can play?
Yeah, the coaching background really has helped me tremendously to have the right eye, the right perspective, to understand how a player goes from freshman in high school to a senior in high school, from a freshman in college to a senior in college. So that background of Ohio State, Boston College, Wright State head coach it's really prepared me for this job, which when I took the job, I was coaching with Rick Majerus, actually having dinner with him when I got offered the job. And so I didn't know what it was going to entail entirely. I didn't know it was going to become this big of a deal. You're going to rank players. You're going to evaluate players. You've done it your whole life. Okay, great. Let's do it. You're going to be on TV for high school games. We're starting to promote high school games on ESPN. I'm like, okay, that's fine. You'll be part of the McDonald's game, and you'll do college basketball. I didn't think it would be that hard, but with social media and the way basketball has become a huge business, it's become a big deal. But the background of coaching really lends itself to a good perspective. So I don't overreact to a bad performance, and I don't get overly excited when I see somebody play really well. I try to get multiple evaluations, and I do a pretty good job of getting intel on a character, because I really think, Pete, the character of a player can protect and enhance his talent as he moves up as a teenager into college.
Is that something now that's become more difficult with the portal era, right? Because I want to ask you about how NIL and the portal have changed the landscape, but I'm starting to get a feeling that you don't get to know these guys. Like you mentioned, Cooper Flagg, around him since he was a sophomore in high school. Yeah, okay, I get that with your relationship with him and also with some of these bigger prospects, but you see guys transferring to schools, and it seems like it's such a short-term courting that a lot of these coaches and programs maybe aren't quite sure who they're getting. Is there credence to that?
No, that's why most programs, especially at the high level, the Power Four, if you will, are going to what they call a GM or a chief of staff or whatever you want to call them. They're coming up with these jobs, roster management coaches, because the turnover is so quick that the assistant coaches can't even keep track of, who is going to be playing for them next, like who's going to be available and how good is that player. And you have to make quick decisions. So you need a staff. It's going to be like the NBA, Pete, where you're going to have a scouting staff and then a coaching staff. That's where it's going to. That's where it really is right now. We saw North Carolina just hire, a GM, because you need somebody who's going to evaluate the prospects, both high school and transfers, all season long, all year long. Then you have to figure out where you're going to get your money and how much you're going to get. And there's, numbers coming down after the antitrust settlement in April. We have revenue money. Will the collective still be a part of it? We don't know. But you have to match the money to the productivity. Because if you get that wrong, just like in the NBA, you're going to have a bad team. So when you're offering kids money, you better make sure that you have evaluated their game and their background, and then offer what you think is the appropriate amount, because you don't want to overspend, and obviously you want to be in the ballpark. The last couple of years, it's been true, capitalism. You don't know what kids really have gotten. Kids have inflated their number. Agents have gotten involved heavily into the recruiting game. And it should settle out as time goes on. I think it's going to go to contracts, Pete, where there'll be independent contractors, and the contracts will be public. There'll be buyouts where schools will get money if a kid decides to transfer. Right now, if a kid transfers, there's no buyout. Like, he gets his money, and he doesn't have to pay the school he just played for anything. So it's going to go to an NBA-type model, I think, when it comes to the scouting staff and also the contracts.
All right, give us a peek ahead to the 2025 draft. What are you looking at, and what is your, the scouting you do for so long, and now it's got to be cool for you to see a lot of these guys, their maturation on the floor and their chances of becoming pro. Give us a little peek into that draft.
Yeah, this draft's going to be one of the best that we've had in a long time. And you're right. When I see these kids in high school and then I see their growing pains as freshmen and sophomores, and sometimes all the way up to senior year in college and with all the transferring. But I do love watching their progress or their lack thereof, and try to look back to their evaluation and say, you know what, he was this way in high school, but he changed. He was this way in high school, but he got better. And it's interesting to see, and I try to provide that information to as many NBA scouts and personnel that look for it. But when you're looking at the top, I think it's a two-player race for Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey for the number one spot. Bailey I believe, is maybe the single most pure talent on the board. What he could be someday, we don't know. We have a greater idea of what Cooper Flagg is all about. And Bailey is 6'10", plays at Rutgers. He's got an excellent jump shot. He's a good rebounder, great athlete, and a shot blocker. He kind of fits the mold of what today's NBA game is all about. And he has that profile and prototype. And then Dylan Harper, his teammate, is a 6'6" big guard. He's going to be coveted in the top 3 spots. And Trey Johnson and your guy, you mentioned VJ Edgecombe, I think they round out the top 5. Tremendous talent, high character kids, and guys that are good to excellent athletes. And then after that, I think when you start going to number 6, I think that's when there's a drop. I think you see not a significant drop, but I think you see a dip after number 5 in the draft.
All right, Paul, where can people find you? I'm going to put all your links up when we trim this up and throw it up on YouTube. But this is amazing information.
At Paul Biancardi on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you want to find me, I'll be there.
You can also catch him on the tube, working a lot of ESPN college hoops games, especially coming down the stretch. Paul, man, what a pleasure, and I love how we muscled through some of the technical stuff, and I was delighted to have you, and I would really like to do it again sometime too.
Yeah, let's do it again, and we'll get the technology right this time.
You got it right either way. Paul Biancardi from ESPN. There he was. It was a great conversation, man. We'll be back to wrap up today's show. The Pete Souza Show, presented by Slovacek's, marches on after this.